Alrighty, hi, I'll get started. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are. Thank you so much for joining me today in my session. This session is called Connecting Legal Spheres, Centering Survivors in Legal Systems. My name is Mars Quinones. I'm the one who will be leading this session. Thank you again to Sarajam and Hannah for being here and helping me facilitate. Yeah, I'll get started. So this is going to be our session lineup today. Before we start, I just love to give a few reminders. There won't be too much heavy topic here today, but in case we do talk about anything that may be triggering to you personally, please feel free to step back. You don't have to turn your camera on, take a few seconds to yourself just to be mindful and take care of yourself. I will try to give warnings if we do come up to some triggering content. So no worries on that. I will let you know for sure. And also feel free to lean into this session as much as you want. I'm really trying to make this be a collaborative session. So if you have any thoughts, any situations that are similar, please feel free to include those either in the chat or towards the end when we have our discussion. And yes, please feel free to lean into your feelings as much as you want. This will be a topic that we cover some kind of difficult experiences and situations. So feel free to lean into that discomfort and kind of, try to see what that brings up within yourself. So our session lineup today, first, we're going to quickly do a poll just so that I can see where all of y'all are coming from. We're going to talk about a bit about the system, acknowledge the flaws, talk a bit about the players in the system. We're going to be talking about scopes of practice for each legal system and folks who are in those specific scopes. Our first case study will be open chat, so it's kind of like an open forum for everyone to kind of discuss together. It'll be a very short case study just to kind of get our brains working and moving this afternoon. After that, we'll be going into some of the gap impacts that affect our survivors as we're going through these legal services. And then we're going to be talking about how to center the survivor throughout these legal systems. With that, we're going to be talking about empathetic language, how to have some difficult conversations. We'll do our last case study that'll be a little lengthier and more collaborative for folks here. And then at the end, we're going to talk about how we can bridge these gaps and how we can address these flaws for our survivors. Next slide, please. So a little bit about myself when we start. I'm Mars, I use she, they. I'm also a survivor. I'm a first generation immigrant. I am the first generation of my family to go to college. I'm first of a lot of things. So I'm very proud to be in a space where I can help other people in my community. Just to give you a little bit of an idea of where I'm coming from, I work for Asian Family Support Services of Austin. We provide culturally specific trauma-informed services to our communities here. I first started off as an economic justice advocate where I helped a lot of our folks find employment, housing, helped them access benefits, things like that. And now I've transitioned into being the legal coordinator. So I run our immigration program internally and I help with a lot of those issues. So just to kind of give you an idea of where I'm coming from and how I kind of came up with the idea of our topic today. If you don't mind going to the next slide. So as I mentioned, this is our quick poll today. How confident are you in providing or referring legal services to survivors of violence? And this is definitely based on how you feel. The comfort levels go from extremely comfortable to not as comfortable. So feel free to take a moment or two and vote in the poll. It is a Zoom poll. And we're just going to take 1 or 2 minutes to let everyone react and cast their vote. All righty, thank you, everyone. I think I'm going to give y'all 10 more seconds to wrap it up. So if you haven't already, please submit your poll answer. All righty. And thank you guys, everyone, for participating. This just kind of helps me get a better idea of how advocates feel as we're accessing legal services. All right, if we could go to the next slide, please. Okay, so before I start talking about the system and everybody involved in it, I just wanted to start off by acknowledging that, the system that we live in and are operating in today was established a long time ago and was made to really promote the livelihoods of certain people and certain communities. As we know, even democracy here, when it was first brought over, was very Eurocentric, very white-centered. And so having that system still be in place today just goes to show that it was not a system created to help our clients and our communities to really take advantage or to succeed in the legal systems. So I just wanted to acknowledge that these systems are not here to really help us or to set us up to succeed, because they weren't made that way with those thoughts in mind when they were originally instated. Even throughout the years, as we've made amendments, as we've added certain things to our legal systems, we still see that a lot of our communities are undervalued, are underappreciated, and under-researched. So we just need to be aware of that as we're moving forward and talking about these certain legal systems, is that we really want to abolish them and replace them with new systems that can allow everybody to equitably seek justice. Next slide, please. So when we're talking about these systems, what exactly are we talking about? I really want to focus on the system, but also the players within that system. Each of these spheres kind of talks about one of the different legal systems. There are many various ones, and a lot of them intersect. As you can see by this Venn diagram, they'll touch each other to various degrees. They can be completely intersected, they can be slightly intersected. But as you see right here, these are all the players that we're talking about. And this is not a short list. There's so many other different players that survivors may touch whenever they go in through the legal system. But these are just a few examples of what we more likely than not know of. And take a moment to just kind of think of that each of these players can be duplicated in each of these systems. When we're talking about a judge, that can be a judge in an immigration court, that could be a judge in a family law court, or in a criminal court. And kind of one thing I want to point out is that one judge in one circle may not be knowledgeable about what goes on in the other courts or the other circles. So just kind of showing everyone that even though these systems may seem similar to each other, they may seem duplicated, they each still have their own nuances and their own players who may be unique to that legal system. And that's a lot of people. Imagine if you're one survivor interacting with all of these circles, that's a lot of people that you're talking to, that you're speaking to, that you're sharing your story to. So that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today, is how do we help survivors interact with all these systems, all these people, and make sure that they're getting the most justice that they can. Next slide, please. So now we're going to talk about scopes of practice. These are just some examples to give you all an idea of what we're talking about when we're speaking about scopes of practices. I will always say that if you have good legal counsel, then they will not advise you outside of their scope of practice. If you're going to go get a divorce consultation, your divorce lawyer should be the first to say, I'm not knowledgeable about this field, so I would advise you that you go speak to someone else. I always think that that is a good indication of a legal provider, that they are honest with what they are well specialized in, rather than trying to give you legal advice on something that they may not be as knowledgeable in. And so as you can see, there's different legal scopes that some of our attorneys or lawyers, our judges, the people working in these systems are part of, and there are certain things that they can, give opinions and give advice on. There are certain things that they can give orders on, but they cannot go outside of their scope. And this is made so that each scope of practice does not, intersect with someone else. Like I said, again, does not give bad advice to someone outside of their scope, so that a court does not make a decision outside of their scope that may negatively impact a survivor. But what happens when we have all these scopes of practice, when we have all these people only specialized in one subject, in one idea, in one court system? And especially when we're asking our survivors to interact with all these scopes, with all these courts, all these systems, is that it can get confusing. Even for someone from this country who is well-educated, well-spoken in English, this can be really confusing not to know exactly where your case lines up, which court it belongs to, or who you will be interacting with during your legal journey. Next slide, please. And so just to kind of give an idea of how overlapping a lot of these needs are, I pulled some statistics from my legal assistance program. Like I mentioned, I coordinate our immigration program here in AFSSA. And so everybody from my program obviously needed immigration support. From the people who needed immigration support, there were 59 clients that we served last year. These were all the clients who needed overlapping needs, or whose needs were also happening at the same time as their immigration case. So out of my 59 clients, 29% of my clients had to seek protective orders or were actively seeking protective orders. So already they're having to handle with the immigration courts. And now on top of that, they're having to also go to criminal court to make sure that they can get these protective orders, extend these protective orders. 48% of them were involved in a criminal court case. Whether or not that case was against them or against their abuser, they were still involved and had to speak with prosecutors, had to meet up with judges, had to give testimony, things like that. And then again, 29% of my 59 clients needed family law consultations and or services. So as you can see from these numbers, a lot of my clients had intersectional needs when it came to the legal field. And that made it really difficult when, a lot of my clients were immigrants, who may not speak English as well as others, had to navigate these English-speaking, US-facing systems. And just kind of a side brief, 4 of my 59 clients had every single need. So they had an immigration case, they had a criminal court case, they had a divorce case pending, and they were also actively seeking a protective order. Alrighty, next slide, please. So very quickly, this is going to be our open forum case study. I just kind of want everyone to read this through and see what are some red flags that you can see from this client's case, some barriers. Kind of as you're hearing her story, how can you start thinking about approaching her legal case and, setting her up for success in even getting involved. So I'll read it out loud, and then folks, you can either drop your answers in the chat, unmute yourselves, however you would like. Anita has approached her agency after calling 911 on her spouse. During her intake, she struggles remembering details and can't exactly recall the order of events. She mentions that she suffered blows to the head and was strangled. Anita has an EPO, but isn't sure how she wants to proceed. She's never considered divorce before and is worried about her immigration status. She mentions that she has an appointment with the prosecutor on her spouse's case and doesn't know what that entails or if she will get in trouble due to her status. After the intake, Anita mentions that she is currently 2 months pregnant. So kind of what jumps out at you from hearing Anita's story? What are some thoughts that you may have when you're thinking about her legal journey and how she may need to start that? Righty, Jenny Sue said in Texas, she may not be able to get a divorce until pregnancy is over. So yes, that is something to make a good note of, is if that is a goal that this client has, that may not be possible since she is currently pregnant in Texas. Tahira said pregnancy, possible concussion, memory loss, immigration status, possibly relying on abuser. Those are great points to make. Would she need to pursue divorce or other legal processes in a specific order? Yes, that would be a good thing to think of as well, since one of them may affect the other. And we'll definitely go in a little further into how they may interact and affect one another. Alrighty, thank you guys. Okay, we have one more. Vanya says she may lose immigration status if she's dependent on a visa. And Kalpana says she's concerned about her immigration status and that of her spouse's prosecution against her could impact her status. That is true. The EPO may help her, but she may need to understand that her status is not implicated by this. Yes, thank you all so much. Alrighty, next slide, please. So when we're thinking about Anita's case, there's so many things going on. We already knew she was married, so possibly she could be looking forward to family law consultations for her divorce. As we all noted, her immigration status, depending on if she's reliant on her spouse or not, that may also be affected. So talking to not only that family law lawyer, but also the immigration attorney. And yeah, she has an active PO, so letting her know what that means, what that entails her, the protections it provides, but she'll also need to start going through the courts in case she wants to extend that protective order. So these are just things that you can always keep in the top of your mind whenever you're doing intakes with clients. Not only the different legal systems that they may encounter, but thinking about the order of those systems just to think of what would be best for them. I'll also go into it a little more about how these systems interact, so we can talk a bit more about that order of consultations. But as we talked about, what happens when all these players are in their own lane, not interacting? You have one person who may not be, well educated in these legal systems. And what happens when you're asking them to now all of a sudden manage 3 legal systems that are all priorities for them, priorities for their safety, for their well-being? Um, so you get presented with a lot of gaps. And what happens is that these vulnerable clients slip through the gaps and don't end up reaching or attaining the justice that they want. One of the biggest gaps that we'll see is disconnected providers. Like I mentioned earlier, if you have a good attorney, they should know what scope of practice they're able to give you advice in. But also, if they are aware that you have a different attorney helping you with a different case, they should be able to connect with that attorney to see if there's anything that could potentially affect either case. And I see this a lot in my program with our family law counselors. They're amazing in knowing that a lot of our clients are on dependent visas, are on visas of some sort, or maybe don't know what their options are after they get divorced. It's a really impactful moment when you're able to connect those two attorneys, just to make sure that a client is receiving a holistic approach to their legal journey. Also, a lot of times when we're talking about USCIS and maybe the legal system or the law enforcement system, law enforcement courts will be really quick to send off, any arrest cases, any, police cases to USCIS. But the minute that those cases are dismissed, they will not be as quick to provide that information to USCIS. So sometimes that can look like our clients all of a sudden, maybe they have a court date because they need to talk about what happened during that arrest. So just knowing that, there may be disconnection between all of these systems. They may not be speaking to each other. They may be speaking to each other, but taking longer than expected. Of course, within that, as I mentioned, someone who knows English may even struggle with accessing these legal services. So knowing that language interpretation is a big part of these system gaps. I know that we are mandated to provide interpretation, an executive mandate, but that does not always mean that it is honored or even provided in a way that is trauma-informed and attainable for our clients. So that's a really big part in making sure that our clients can receive justice, is making sure that they're able to speak their story and give their side to the case that they're in. And the last one, cultural differences in practices. I've seen so many different cases where the clients aren't aware that our courts here are different than the courts overseas. They're not aware that when they're granted custody, that they have the choice to be the primary parent, that the custody won't go straight to their spouse. So just letting them know that the way that our court systems operate are vastly different, educating them on what those differences may be and preparing them for what they may encounter as they're going through these systems. Also, just different cultural practices that in itself can also lead into different language access. I remember being part of a training where the interpreter refused to say the word rape, and they kept saying, sex or sexual assault. And that was very harmful for that client's story because, she was very clearly stating that she was raped and assaulted. Her consent was taken away. But rather than saying that straight out, they said it in a different way that invalidated that survivor's experience. So making sure that you have accurate interpretation, that you're taking care of the cultural practices that this client has so that they can feel empowered as they're moving forward through the system. All righty, next slide, please. So what happens when we have these gaps and they're affecting our clients? A lot of times you may see, the very first step of how that affects them, but these are honestly ripple effects. Back from when I was an economic justice advocate, I would work a lot with clients who are going through their immigration journeys, and you'd be surprised at how important those journeys are even outside of the legal implications. A lot of these clients, they have their day-to-day lives. They still need to find housing. They still need to find employment. And when any of their legal cases are either in a pressing stage or not moving forward, that can impact something else. For instance, when I was helping clients find housing, a lot of them couldn't decide where they would be, county-wise, area-wise, because they knew that they were going to be geographically restricted after the divorce was finalized. So they had to wait. They were in a limbo. They couldn't move anywhere else. They had to basically just be at the mercy of the courts and what the judge decide. Also, a lot of times when we're waiting for clients to get their work authorization, that is, again, they're at the vulnerability of the USCIS system of how quickly they're able to get their work authorization. So a lot of these effects, even though they may be preliminary to, their legal outcomes, they will still affect the clients in other aspects of their lives. All right, next slide, please. Okay. So in this really difficult and turbulent system, how do we center our survivors? Like I said, a lot of these survivors will be interacting with different systems. They will be unsure of exactly what the outcome will be, and maybe the outcome is different than what they are seeking. So we really need to work on centering our survivors and making sure that they're being heard so that they can receive the best type of justice for themselves. Next slide, please. Really quickly, I know we're all professionals here, so I know you'll know about these impacts very well, but just a reminder that, again, our survivors are going to be highly emotional. They may be experiencing something traumatic for the first time, for the 10th time, for the 100th time, but regardless, they will always feel that, they will regress to lizard brain, they will get triggered, they may have some TBI, so their state of mind will not be as it normally is. And specifically, when we're talking about these legal systems, system professionals can also be part of this triggering impact. While we would love a lot of our law enforcement and legal providers to be trauma informed, that is unfortunately not the standard across our nation. So sometimes law enforcement can add to that trauma when they're responding to a call. Sometimes judges can invalidate a survivor's feelings depending on the type of decision that they make in court. So just being aware that our legal systems are expecting a perfect survivor, and that is not who we are serving. Next slide, please. Alrighty. So when we're talking about a survivor-led approach, how do we even begin to think about starting that process? How do we hold our hand out and help this person go through all those different legal systems? Especially when a lot of our legal systems look different, the outcomes are different. The first thing that I would love to tell everyone is just to listen and absorb. Hear the client's story, hear what they've been through, exactly what they, the disrespect that they have felt, the injustice that they have felt, and in exactly what capacity they have felt it too. These stories can be very different. They can be interlocking, have so many complexities. So just hearing and absorbing and giving that survivor space to tell their story the way that they want it to be told. And then asking and exploring. I think this is a very vital part, especially when we're talking about the legal system. As I've said before, this is an imperfect legal system. The word justice has so many different definitions across each court, depending on what you are seeking. And I really like to ask our survivors, what kind of justice do you want? Because that can look different for all of them. Their justice may be, I want my story to be heard. I want my story to be validated. Their justice may also be, I want my abuser to be in front of a jury and get told that he's guilty and to go to jail. And again, depending on where your client is coming from, they may have different expectations on what that looks like. Their idea of court discipline might be more severe than the discipline that's available in our courts. So that may not match up even if they do win their court case. So really talk to your survivor. Try to see, ask those questions. What does justice look like to you? What would help you feel vindicated? What would help you feel like you are now being heard and, your story is being told? After kind of hearing and matching up, their idea of justice to the process that they are seeking, kind of educating them and providing them knowledge on what they're about to encounter. If being divorced is what they want to do, they no longer want to be part of their marriage, just letting them know what that looks like in the United States court system when you get a divorce. And of course, providing your client with the necessary trauma-informed resources so that they can start educating themselves, and just reaching out to other folks to get assistance with that matter. Lastly, collect and unite. Once you're able to refer to those resources, collecting those members of the community, uniting your client with those people, creating community for your client so that they can feel well supported throughout their legal journey. It doesn't always have to be legal professionals that you can reach out to. It can be paralegals. It can be someone like me who just leads a legal program. Anybody who can support your survivor as they're going through their journey. That is how I like to start my survivor-led approach. I know a lot of it can be very complex and can look different depending on what your survivor looks like, but I think this is a good basis to start when we're talking about legal services. Next slide, please. And with talking about that, as I mentioned, sometimes our client's justice looks different than what they can attain through the courts. And so when we're having those conversations with our clients, sometimes it may be difficult to tell them that our system is flawed, that it will not give them the justice that they deserve, but that still does not invalidate their experience. So in this point, empathetic language is going to be really useful to make sure that the client feels supported and validated, knowing that they are going through a flawed system, that the flaws of the system are not reflective of their stories of who they are and the trauma that they got through. So some of these difficult conversations, they can be tough. They can be tough to approach. You can take days thinking on how do I even talk about this? And I know firsthand working in the immigration system that sometimes there's no recourse available to everybody, that sometimes the requirements for certain recourses are so specific or very difficult to attain. And so as much as a survivor wants to stay here, as much as, we can tell that they've been a survivor, we now have to tell them that unfortunately they're in a system that does not feel the same way. And so how do we have that conversation? How do we tell our survivors that, this system is messed up and, it sucks for everybody? I always like to focus on the things that we can change and the actions that we can take. For instance, if I'm in court with a survivor and maybe, they didn't give their story the way they wanted to, they come back to me afterwards and they say, I really feel like I didn't have enough time, or I didn't hit the highlights that I practiced, or, I just didn't feel as confident as I wanted to when we practiced. But when I was on that stand, your mind just goes blank. I like to focus on the things that the survivor did beautifully, that they did confidently, saying, hey, you were here in this courtroom with your abuser, and that makes you so strong. I am so proud of how you showed up today and were present, knowing that this was going to be difficult. Or, just saying that the strength to testify in court is tremendous. Like, there are people who live here who are citizens who wouldn't even do that. So I am so proud of you for having that courage. Just uplifting our survivors from what they are able to do rather than what they feel like they lost out on. I feel like that really centers them again, helps them remember that they are just human. We all make mistakes. And that again, any lack or fault of the system is not a representation of the survivor. It is a representation of how much more work we need to do with our system so that it can provide for us. Next slide, please. Alrighty, I know that was a lot of information, but I would like everyone to go into their breakout rooms now for case study 2, and just kind of chat with each other and see, after reading this and talking about what we've mentioned, what are some skills, some tactics that we can use, some practices to really support Anita and think about her story moving forward. What do you think justice looks like to Anita? I think there's one more highlight. No, I think that was it. Alrighty, so feel free to join a breakout room. If you don't want to join a breakout room, you can hang out in here with me. Just talk amongst your peers, see what y'all think. And yeah, talk about how you would approach this in your own agency. If you have the resources to support Anita, what that looks like. Alrighty, and if you're here too, you can feel free to drop in the chat any of your thoughts. If you just want to chat with us about your thoughts, that is totally fine as well. I think we'll be here for about 5 to 10 minutes just to give everyone time to caucus. Alrighty, welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much. Does anybody want to share any thoughts that they had with their breakout group? Any thoughts on how you would start your case management with Anita? Any highlights, any red flags that you see? And feel free to unmute yourself or just drop it in the chat. Alicia says, always trying to be client-led, even if the client doesn't necessarily make the same decision going forward as you might have thought they would. Whether it's deciding to stop the process or move forward, it's always their choice. Absolutely. Especially in legal systems, if they're paying for the representation or, if they're being represented by someone else, they should always have their ideas and thoughts first and foremost at the front of their legal case.
We also talked about validating, and yeah, Tahira just mentioned it too. Validating that the system does suck and that their decisions and options are something we want to stand with.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alpha. Yeah, of course. Alicia also mentioned earlier that she was curious about maybe why the mistrial occurred and how that would affect the client. That is one thing about our legal systems is that there can be a lot of external forces that impact the case and how it goes. And one of them is a mistrial, and that can be due to administrative issues, due to the jury maybe talking about something they weren't supposed to. And having a mistrial can be super disheartening for a client, especially after they were so vulnerable to show up to court, to put their heart on the stand, to face their abuser, and now being told that they have to go through that system again, even though they did nothing wrong and they participated the way that they were supposed to. And that can be really heartbreaking. That can be, super demoralizing, invalidating. So even just thinking about how we need to approach that, how we need to, re-support Anita, revalidate her, let her know it's your choice if you want to go through that again. But also letting her know what the outcome of that is, if she decides to do that or not. Any last thoughts before we move on? Alrighty, well, we can go on to the next slide. We only have a few minutes left. Alrighty, so I know a lot of the system sucks. How do we even begin to think about overcoming this system, about empowering our survivors in a system that's not built for them? As advocates and providers, I would like y'all to just think of 2 words. You don't even need to remember these 2 phrases. If all you can remember is knowledge and numbers, then thank you. Then you got something out of my training. You can share this back. But that is the 2 mottos of how I think we can start by building systems that can help our survivors and by helping them basically become experts in how to take advantage of the system for themselves. Please, next slide. So as we go through the next slides, I just kind of want y'all to keep those 2 phrases in mind. And first, I'd like to talk about what we can do as advocates. As advocates, we are in a special, unique place where we are able to connect with our community, be aware of those barriers, and still support our survivors to make sure that they're able to access the most impactful services and get the justice that they deserve. Do you mind going back 2 slides? Thank you. Because systems are exclusionary and advocacy is inclusionary. We are specifically here to make sure that there are no gaps, that there are no faults, and that when they are, that they are addressed or that we meet those needs in a different way. As advocates, our job is to support people and to work in collective spaces where we're given the opportunity to join trainings, to join conferences like this, to work with different colleagues who all have different knowledge and collaborate with each other. And of course, to work with different community agencies to make sure that we have a holistic approach to all of our client needs. There are very few other job positions where you get to be that level of support and have that opportunity to go out and gain this knowledge to help others. So I always think it's important to remember that as advocates, we are our biggest tool. The more that we support ourselves and learn and gain knowledge, the better we'll be in supporting our clients. Next slide, please. But that doesn't mean we can do it all. Obviously it takes more than just us. It takes numbers, it takes all of us. So the community building aspect is also very important. When you need to promote anti-violence, you need to go and imbibe your community, to imbibe your community with love and caring. And when you interact with the legal and law enforcement systems, that is really when you can begin your advocacy. The way that we do that here at AFSSA is we have an amazing community education team. And last year, they really focused on providing a lot of trainings, trauma-informed trainings, cultural specific trainings to district attorneys, judges, the people in our domestic violence court systems. And just by starting to do that, we've learned so much. We've learned that some judges are not as educated in immigration as they should be, that sometimes they don't know the impacts of the specific case that they decide on and how that may impact the survivor in other legal systems. We've heard that, they want to be educated and learn more about the immigration aspects in our community, but they don't have those opportunities. And so that's when our agency needs to come in and fill in those gaps and make sure that they're thinking about these outerlying systems and not just the one that they are working in. And also holding community spaces and offering resources to make sure that everyone has access to the knowledge that they need. Right now, I know there's a lot going on in our political system, so we're holding a lot of Know Your Rights sessions, making sure that everyone is aware that they do have rights, how they're able to use those, how they're able to, make sure that they are as safe as possible in whatever environment they're in. So it's really important to connect with your community, to start talking to those different players of the legal enforcement system, and to also bring in those legal system providers to talk to different attorneys, see how they can improve their services to become more trauma informed and more culturally relevant. It's always great when you're able to really talk to a group of people that you all know have the same thought in mind, but maybe weren't aware of the different tools that they could use to get to the same goal. Next slide, please. All righty. And so looking to the future of legal advocacy, I think a lot of the work that we still need to do as advocates and as agencies is to keep sharing the information that we're learning with one another, to demystify the system and to make it less scary for everyone. Thankfully, from what it looked like at the beginning, everybody here has some type of confidence in providing legal services, and I love to see that. And yeah, I just want to make sure that we keep spreading the knowledge so that everyone else is also as confident when they are providing these services to our clients. And that, remember, the number aspect is that we all have to come together collectively. One person by themselves, they can be impactful, but they won't be as impactful until they're joined by their community. So working collectively, knowing that, don't gatekeep any of the information. If you know how to really get through a system really well, make sure you tell other agencies. I really love to share the information that we have from our immigration program just because it helps other agencies figure out how to shape their immigration program, how to start approaching immigration in this very tough time. So yeah, just sharing with one another, being collaborative so that we can lift each other up and strongly present a workforce against the flaws of the legal system. Alrighty, next slide. So I know someone had a question about, lots of things are changing. How can we look to resources to help us keep updated with these changes? So these are a couple of the immigration agencies that I personally look to for a lot of information. The first one is Tahiri. I hope everybody knows about Tahiri. They are amazing. I love the way that they put out all of their updates. They're super thorough, and they also provide technical assistance to some agencies. So if that's available to you, they can one-on-one help you figure it out. SOAR as well. I love SOAR. I love the email that they send out with all of the updates concerning our policies. It's so easy to read. And then, of course, if you are in Texas, you can be part of the Texas Immigration Law Council. Just to give you a bit more of an idea of what's going on here specifically, we are a red state and it is spicy. So there's always lots of fun things going on here. AFSSA as well. They're a national immigration agency, kind of like SOAR. It's a collective of a lot of different agencies working together. And then the Immigration Advocates Network, if you would like some more trainings, if you need some updates, some knowledge on what exactly is going on, I think they're an amazing resource. Alrighty, next one, please. Alrighty, and then our open discussion forum. I've been chatting so much, but I'm sure that everyone else has a lot of thoughts on how they've been accessing the legal system with their clients, how they've been managing their processes as well. So I would love to just have an open forum if anyone has any thoughts, any ideas. If you disagree with something I said, I am more than happy to hear your thoughts on this. So feel free to unmute yourself or to drop it in the chat. If everyone's collecting their thoughts, I'll just address a question that someone brought up during our case study, is kind of knowing which one to start with first, like which consultation to start with first. If they have a family law consultation, an immigration consultation, how do we decide what gets done first? The realistic answer I will always give everyone is go with whichever consultation you can get scheduled first, because whoever is willing to give you their time for free, I would go and get as many questions answered as possible. Secondly, that would also just depend on what your client is experiencing. If they're on a dependent visa, if they do not have their own status, it would be a good idea to try to do the immigration consultation and family law consultation at the same time, just so that as they're going through their divorce proceedings, they can be aware of what may exactly happen to their status and prepare for some kind of recourse in the meantime. That doesn't always mean that recourse may be available to the client. So again, just being prepared for what that consultation may look like. And yeah, being prepared to kind of support them afterwards if there's any fallout. Alrighty. Well, if no one else has any more thoughts, next slide, please. Okay, yeah. Hold on. Let me get to this one last question from Kalpana. I'm an attorney providing legal services at the intersection of GBV and immigration. I work with a legal services agency. We prioritize a survivor-centered approach, transparency, and arming people with knowledge. What more would advocates like to see from legal service providers? This is a great question, Kalpana. Thank you so much. When here in our agency, I always try to encourage our advocates to be as involved in the cases as possible, to make sure that the attorney knows, the advocate knows this is another person they can reach out to if they have any questions concerning the case, so that they can do that co-advocacy. And that really helps them a lot when they have so many different cases, just spread out everywhere, to let them know that there's another person besides the client that they can talk to and kind of be that point of contact surrounding that case. It's also really helpful sometimes when attorneys explain things to the advocates, and the advocates who are in a more stable mindset are able to remember those things versus our clients who may be, in that trauma space, may be, again, doing 4 other legal cases. They may not remember. They may not exactly, remember all the answers that they got or exactly what they asked. So having someone there with them to take notes, to know, and to better understand how to explain what's going on, I think that would be really helpful for your clients to know that if they also have questions, that you can kind of fill them in so that they're not going back and forth with the attorney. Yes, Tahira, I know that is something that is very difficult. There's so much need and not enough attorneys. So, what do you do when you have all these pro bono attorneys who are swamped? And I think, again, I think that's where the advocate can kind of come in and help. I know that, maybe that's not our the hat that we want to wear, being a paralegal, but there have been many times where I've had to go in and kind of be an assistant to that attorney. Because I know that for me, putting in that work, that would help the client's case go along further. And I know that's not ideal. That's not what we want to do. Um, and I know it's also not ideal because not everybody can do that. Not everyone has the same capacity. But just doing the most that we can to make sure that the attorney's plate is a little lessened so that they can go forward with that. Um, and yeah, all right. Well, thank you everyone for joining me today. I am so grateful for you all for attending with me and for hearing me. And thank you again to SOAR for hosting me and for letting me share my thoughts. I'll hand it back over to you again, SOAR.
Thank you so much, Mars, for leading this session. As we saw in the chat and with the chat questions, this is a really critical offering at a really timely, in a timely way, since we're all like struggling with so much overwhelm with all the things that are changing in the legal landscape. So thank you so much. Really appreciate especially your emphasis on how to do this work in a survivor-centered way.